All right, good evening, everybody. Happy Sunday. We're here to do our evening Savvy Chat. I'm your host, Jen Horangeff, and I'm super excited about tonight because I've got two amazing guests, Miya Osaki and Tina Park from Diagram, and they are design researchers. So we're really in for a treat because we are going to be talking about how to innovate with purpose. And this is one of Savvy's core values. So we're really going to be breaking it down with the people that help do this day in and day out. So first, let's meet our fabulous guests and learn where they're calling in from. So Miya, where are you joining us from tonight?
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having us, Jen. I'm calling from San Diego, California. And I'm out on vacay.
Perfect. And Tina, where are you at tonight?
I'm at my home. I live a little north of the city, and it's called Garrison. So it's like a lush jungle right now outside because of all the rain.
Amazing. So Diagram is based in New York City, and you guys are a firm that really is dedicated to improving the health experiences and health outcomes by really trying to capture that through sort of the patient perspective, which of course we are all about. So we're super excited to be talking about that. And, you know, we work with a lot of companies, as do you, of course, that are trying to improve the patient experience. And I really feel that oftentimes people don't realize that that takes some work and that you need to be sometimes connecting with designers like yourselves to really kind of get at the core of what patients are looking for and need and what their pain points are. So as we talked about today, we're going to talk about innovating with purpose, and that's one of our core values. But as designers, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think that for us, design at the core of it is about problem solving. And so we're constantly trying to figure out what is the problem to solve. We use tenets of behavior design as well. So really looking at people's behavior and trying to understand how we can either continue an existing behavior or change or create a new behavior. And so as designers, we're really trying to use those kind of methods and approaches that are creative, that use expression as a way to kind of talk about things that are really challenging, especially in healthcare when people are managing chronic disease.
Yeah, so I mean, I think all of that's fabulous. And as I started going down sort of my healthcare journey and then into the professional world, I wasn't a designer by training, and now I'm seeing the applications of it. So how did you guys both get into design?
Well, we both have kind of a, and I went to, so we've known each other for many, many years. We went to Art Center College of Design, and we ended up in a program that was really focused on human-centered design through a product development path. And so we were looking, the program was looking at how do you create interventions by really who's using your products or services. And so we both had that strong foundation and ended up at the design office of John, who they had kind of a startup innovation design center in New York City. And we started a group that was looking at designing specifically to help improve the patient experience and improve patient engagement, specifically around chronic disease. So Tina and I we go way back, and we've worked together side by side for many years doing design research and experience design, which go very hand in hand in terms of being able to look and understand what people need and then translating that into design, which is, to your first question, I think that's what designers really, strive at, is looking at how do you take something that you've seen in the world and try to figure out how to improve upon it.
And so how did you guys even get into sort of the healthcare aspect? Was that happenstance, or was it just, your first job? Were you drawn to it in some way? Because healthcare, of course, is its own interesting beast.
Yeah, we both have different paths, so I'll go with mine first. I actually, when I was in graduate school, or I just finished graduate school, I really had a great opportunity to join a Robert Wood Johnson Foundation grant from the Pioneer Portfolio, which was looking at teenagers who had chronic disease and were transitioning from pediatric to adult healthcare. And I had the opportunity to go and interview teens and talk to them about, what their challenges were. These were teens that were very ill, had hemophilia, had a lot of different blood disorders, and also we had a set of teens that had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. And so I just loved being able to kind of feel like I was supporting them and being able to kind of give them a voice, and they had not had that opportunity. And after that, I kind of just devoted myself to healthcare because I saw that there was such a need for a different type of thinking and to help fill out just cross-disciplinary teams. And so I worked with several different, the Palo Alto Medical Foundation. I worked with Stanford and did some work out on the West Coast. And then I went over to Johnson & Johnson and helped lead the design research team there. And when we left J&J, we knew that we wanted to continue to help, conduct research with these patients and help translate those experiences. And that's why we started Diagram.
Yeah, amazing. And Tina, that's how you and I got connected, was through some of that early work in your transition work, working in the juvenile arthritis space, since that's the disease I had. We had some mutual friends and colleagues there. So I was so happy that our journeys have now been brought together.
It's a great community.
Absolutely is. You don't have to convince me. So Miya, what was kind of your journey to get to this point? How did you end up in healthcare?
It's not so straightforward. I was a musician in my first career. So I was in the music industry for many years, and then decided to, the music industry, just to make a long story short, the music industry was changing into digital music at the time. And I was very fascinated by that, and was really interested in trying to figure out how something, everyone kind of thought it was the end of the music industry and as we know it. And it really turned into something that was amazing and very powerful. So I went back to school, went to and kind of look at the new world at the time, which was more technology driven. Ended up, I thought industries, and ended up at Johnson & Johnson and just fell in love with a problem, which was healthcare was changing. And I felt like if the people who were actually very involved and interested in healthcare weren't looking at what the needs of people were, that healthcare could really go down a very different path in terms of how it's designed. And so I was very curious about that. I loved, similar to what Tina said, we just loved working with patients and hearing people. And at the end of the day, everybody's a patient. So understanding those stories and figuring out how do we design things in a way that make things better. I mean, music is, I would say, from most part, digital music has really changed the industry and become better. For a lot of people, it's become much more accessible, very much more interesting. And so, I think that healthcare kind of faces the same things.
Yeah, and so that makes me think, I mean, you guys are both talking about how you were at J&J, Johnson & Johnson, the pharmaceutical company. So, can you tell us about, some of your time there and what sort of overall trends that you're seeing either then and now in the pharma industry in particular, before we kind of dive into what it might look like in other sectors of healthcare? Do you see that trend like you talk about in music? Is that happening, or are we not there yet?
We had a really exciting and unique opportunity when we started at J&J. We were almost able to operate like a startup within the company. And this was almost 10 years ago. And J&J was really progressive in being able to see the trend of patients being able to take control of their hair a lot. Before that, the focus had always been on doctors and nurses and other healthcare providers and payers. And they just really were able to kind of see the writing on the wall 10 years ago and see that patients really were coming to the forefront, being decision makers, wanting to have more involvement in their care. And they said, well, we better learn how to talk to patients. And so that was really exciting for us. And
kind of the start of patient-centered, the whole idea of having patient-centered care or patient-centered design. very, very early on.
And so why is that? I mean, is there a competitive advantage to it? Is there mandates? Or like, why do you guys see, or what were you hearing about why pharma was starting to shift, or J&J in particular was starting to take on this new human-centered design?
I think that they really were thinking about how to move beyond the pill. So that was kind of what they would always say, is that they, as a company, had historically always provided the therapy. They had, millions and millions of dollars behind all of the research that had gone into the therapy. And they realized that in order to really be competitive, they had to move beyond the pill, which meant what types of products and services can be built to support patients who are on therapy. And I think that they realized that if we are going to design kind of next generation patient support programs and really help to understand what the patients' lives are about, we better get out there and talk to patients. And so I think they realized as well that design as a way could help to support that in a way that they hadn't as marketers, as a brand team generally does. And so they really were thinking about how to bring design to the table, to the forefront, early in the process, in the drug development process. And
that's what I find so interesting is with pharmaceutical companies in particular, these giant beasts, or many of the ones that we are naturally thinking of. And you guys talk about how you were able to sort of operate as a startup and doing this sort of innovation work. How did you see the buy-in on sort of the company-wide level? Was it possible to really affect real change, or did you feel like you were kind of kicking and screaming that this is the way it should be done and were able to make an impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's always an education. I think that even with the best intentions, where to listen to patients, that this work, patient-centered design or patient-centered forward work is challenging, and it's hard, and it's soft in some ways. We're learning how to measure it and come up with ways to understand what the impact is of improving an experience, but some of it is a little intangible. And we worked not just with pharma, but with medical devices, and we would just hear over and over from patients that I don't want to think about my disease all the time. I want to live my life. People have goals, right? And how do you measure that when you start as a company to see how that impacts things like improved adherence or improved experience with your product or service? So it is challenging, and it's at Diagram, part of what we want to do is help companies to understand why this work is so important and how to do it well, and enable them to be able to bring this kind of work to their hospital or to their company.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit, because what I find when we talk about the work that we do at Savvy, people automatically think that we really just mean we're working with pharma, and that's really not the case. And in fact, that's a minority of the people that we end up working with. So tell us about the kind of clients that you guys have at Diagram. Like, who else cares about the patient experience? Because I hope there are others.
Yeah, it's really, it's been actually very exciting. We've been doing this work for a very long time, as we talked about. And we see more and more people kind of coming into the fold and saying, yeah, we need to get out there and talk to patients. We worked with a startup that was 7 years into the business, and they were focusing on mental health. And they were really excited about talking to the people that had gone through their program, the types of people that potentially might go through their program. And they were very interested in kind of finding out what their stories were and who they were. We've also worked with hospitals to try to improve the ER experience, and they brought patients in to kind of explain what the process was that they went through and where their kind of pain points and successes were. And so we see a lot of people, innovation teams, customer experience, kind of coming to us and say, we need to bring someone else in and help us to kind of talk to these people in different ways, trying to draw out of them really the details of their experience and help us to try to figure out how we can improve that.
Yeah, so let's kind of like unpack that a bit. So you talked about some of these examples, and I think that you and I are used to talking about these things, but for people that might be listening in, that this is their first foray into like, how in the world would I, talk to patients? Why would I do that? What is the change that ends up happening? Could you give some example? I understand you need to, have some anonymity for your clients, but what does that look like? What kind of work did you do to understand the patient experience? And then what change did the companies or organizations make? How did they use that? Or are we just saying we're listening to patients, but then don't act on it?
Yeah, I mean, one example is that we had a project that was around heart disease, and the company knew that they wanted to provide, a better experience who had a heart attack, and so they wanted to go out and talk to patients. So that's the work we started with. And interesting was that when we started going out to speak with different people who had a cardiovascular disease, and had such a range in people. There were people who could go in and have a heart attack and walk out 2 days later and go back to work. And then there were people who had a heart hospital for 6 months and were unable to, needed a lot of care at home. And so that in itself was a discovery for the company, who was basically saying, let's help patients who have had a heart attack so that they can, make behavior changes, or how can we support them better? But the range of patients and their situations was different, and so what we ended up doing was encouraging and aligning with the organization to say, who do you impact with, and what area do we want to focus on? Because, when you look at somebody's needs, somebody who had open heart surgery and who's going to be in recovery for 6 months. And that's where design really, starts to take shape, is when you can really start, and it's a position that we take at Diagram, which is, let's start and be very specific and figure out what people need, and then, look at scaling that and figuring out what things can then, we can open it up and will apply to a greater audience. And that's a hard decision for a business, right? To say that, he's a type of patient and understand that. But that's really where great innovation comes from.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a great sort of example, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that particular example, but say, Tina, what have you seen? How have you heard from your clients on what changes they've implemented based on the work that you've done and the results that you found by talking to patients?
Well, with the mental health client, for example, when we helped to kind of translate the insights that we found out from the patients, one is that they kind of started to build new scripts for their the conversations that their kind of representatives were having with patients, because they were learning more about them and how to speak to them in a language that they understand, and I think that really started to change the type of conversation that you're having. We've also done a lot of kind of role play with doctors and with patients as well. And part of that was also about trying to figure out like what type of language. And the biggest thing is really what we've figured out is that, how do we meet patients where they are? I think historically we've always kind of tried to say, like, let's throw them science, let's throw them these facts that are really impressive. But patients don't really speak in those terms. And so in a lot of our work, it's all about trying to speak in a language that they understand, that they connect with, and that they really want to, and that will help them to think differently or to change the way that they're behaving.
Yeah, and I think, you bring up something that I hear all the time about, talking sort of in the way or communicating in ways that are appropriate for patients. And I think sometimes that can be loaded from the standpoint that many people think that means like watering things down, they couldn't possibly understand. And what I know of what you guys are talking about, it's not that it's, patients are dumb, they won't understand any of this, they couldn't possibly comprehend doctor speak. It's just, is that the relevant conversation? Are the topics that are being talked about what matter most to the patient? And how can you sort of elicit that in those conversations? Is that really kind of what you're seeing and doing and trying to help your clients understand?
That's right. So goal-oriented language, I think, is a really big thing. Trying to really understand how clinically something can help to get them to a larger goal that they might have. That's more of a life goal. So, that clinical and that life kind of working together. Also, in ways where sometimes they don't connect with certain vernacular in healthcare. So. I recently was working on a project for rheumatoid arthritis, for example, and a lot of the patients, they said, I really wish people would stop calling it arthritis because it's a general term that people think, oh, yeah, I have arthritis, or oh, yeah, my grandmother has that. And as you well know, rheumatoid arthritis is nothing like that. And so, like, a lot of the people that we were speaking with, they said, I just really don't even like to call it arthritis because it's not a term that I connect with, and it's not a term, I think that it really kind of demeans it in other people's eyes. And so that type of language is the type of language that we find, that is kind of really coming to light when we do the research that we do.
It's so interesting you say that. I'm just coming from earlier this week being at the Juvenile Idiopathic Arthritis Patient-Focused Drug Development meeting, and a lot of parents got up and just said, I hate the word arthritis. It just isn't what my child, associates with, and we just hate it. So although we can't change the names of these diseases that easily, although humorously we did change the name of juvenile idiopathic arthritis from juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, oftentimes we just have to find other ways to communicate and help patients understand how they can also communicate their conditions, either with their care team or with the other people around them that they're interacting with. And what you're just working on brings us to a great question we just got in our chat about how do you implement this? So they're asking, how much do you work with the client on implementation? Or do you start to partner with other firms to handle that sort of change?
Yeah, we, Diagram is we operate in a very, we love the process of kind of not right after discovery. We've done in our career, I have done very early discovery research where it's very like, we don't know anything. We want to find out everything about it, out to, doing valid human factors type of research. So we've done the whole kind of product development cycle. Where we feel like companies really have needed the most help historically has been in this space of, we have an idea, we want to make something probably very quickly, but we don't know how, and where we focused. If you wait until you get to implementation in healthcare to get to the how, it's going to be too late. The processes that you have to go through, you've got regulatory, you've got all of these kind of design requirements. You want to do as much of that work up the chain as you can. And so our work has been very focused on working with patients, partnering and rapidly iterating and prototyping so that when you get to figuring out what it is that you want, you've already gotten input all along the way. And so when that's a hand easier because they know what they're implementing. We're small, just to answer the person's question, we're small. So when we have done implementation work, but we're very, very happy to hand that off to a company that, can manage, a large service implementation, for example.
Yeah, there are specialists and firms that do that sort of change behavior and integration.
That's right. But you don't want to jump from straight to hiring a company to, build your software. I just think that's what we're always trying to caution.
And yeah, I think we have a follow-up. I was talking about the implementation management required to make a huge change in focus, she discussed. And I think that we kind of talked a little bit about that at the beginning, about how do you get buy-in from all the levels to kind of adopt some of the work that you guys are doing. Do you feel that that's kind of what's being addressed?
Yeah, I think that there's always some internal work that needs to be done, especially in the type of work that we're doing because of the just the different way of thinking. And so oftentimes we do work with internal teams. We work in a very embedded model, so we oftentimes are working very closely with teams. When they have kind of different meetings that are where there's initiatives happening in different swim lanes, we also are a part of that because we want to make sure that the work that we're doing can influence as wide a net as possible. So there is oftentimes a lot of work that needs to be done within that. What we try to do is we try to create change makers within the company that can then lead the work, because as external vendors, we only have so much pull, right, to do that. And so usually we're working with, a core team, and then they do the next step in order to kind of get that to be kind of flowed throughout the company. Hopefully that answers the question.
And I think, what you're talking about of kind of all these moving parts and things, we get questions like this of, we're a startup, you guys are a startup, then what happens for those startups or those companies that don't have the big budgets, that aren't J&J and can fund their whole team or hire a team like you? What's a good suggestion for people on how to get started, at least to get to that next phase when then they could bring on a team like yourselves?
I think just, this work really and how to do it and what makes a difference. I think that it is, working or partnering with a group that work within healthcare is really helpful. If you don't, you can, do a workshop, or you can do some working with a company like, our company works. Oftentimes we'll always try to cut a piece of to help create a really strong foundation. And I think that's important too. I think just going in thinking that like we're going to make all of this change and it's going to happen, create a project plan for it. I mean, we always try to reel it back and say like, let's do this in a smart way and try to figure out what is your organization like? How can we set this up for the best success? I also think, like, from our point of view, it's really on board will be so valuable, and trying to understand that there is a design component to Human Center is I think designers are really important in that mix, and bringing a skill set that is super valuable. So
absolutely. And so before we jump into our rapid fire, I will let Tina first respond if there's anything else you're kind of thinking along that line on how can people get started.
I think that the only thing I would say is, train yourself up on how to interact with users in a kind of ethical way. And, and once you've done that, I mean, trying to do as much, if you're kind of an army of one, I would say, like, don't develop too quickly without talking to the end user. And that's just, it can be done guerrilla style, it can be done, but I think getting it out there, I think a lot of times people wait too long because they don't want to show anything that's not perfect, but the imperfection is where you learn so much. And so I would say that that's my advice is we teach at the School of Visual Arts in the Design for Social Innovation class, a graduate program, and we make our students get out there and talk to people before they start making anything.
Yeah, and I think, that's one of the things that we're sensitive to here at Savvy is that we understand that not everybody has the same sorts of budgets, but yet that means that they often are left with very little resources. We actually had one of your students come over and try to reach out to some patients before because they didn't know where else to turn. And so that's why we're trying to create some of those resources. It might not be the same expertise as having a designer work hand in hand, but at least helping to solve that problem of how can I find the right people to talk to? Because otherwise people are just asking friends and family, and that's not necessarily reflective of the population that they're trying to design for. And so if that's the kind of feedback they're getting, then it's might lead them down the wrong path. And so that's what we try to help with, just that little piece of the puzzle. All right, so let's get into some rapid fire just quickly as we kind of close this out. We just like to know a little bit more about our guests. We all have lives, and as you say, most of us don't want to be patients, so we're not always thinking about this. So what do you guys do when you're not being savvy and designing things at Diagram?
Cooking.
Nice.
Eating.
What was that, Mia?
She said
eating. Eating. Okay, you guys.
Good partnership. Yeah.
All right, here's a trickier one, but what's one of the biggest healthcare headaches and challenges that you think we have to address?
For me, I would say it's really being able to think beyond the traditional ways that exist. Right now, healthcare is a really exciting space. There's new players coming into the field that are outside of healthcare. And I think that in order for people to be able to catch up, they really have to stay constrained within the regulations that are required of healthcare, but be able to kind of push and pull those boundaries a bit and think beyond kind of what the traditional healthcare has been for the last, some odd decades.
Yeah. Miya, what would you say?
I think it's partnering. I think what you're doing with Savvy and groups like you, I think this is going to be the future, is really trying to figure out how do we partner in new ways, and how do we figure out how to pull in the right people to get the input that's needed, particularly from patients. And that's going to require us to rethink a lot of our systems right now that don't allow us to interface in the ways that we need to. We need to do it quick. We need to do it frequently. We need to do it a lot. We need quality work, and all of those things require resources and regulation and new policies and new legal frameworks for us to be able to do that together. So,
ooh, that is a big headache. We won't solve either of those things.
Who's done it? It's just it can be crazy. It takes
well, then, with some levity, we'll go to my favorite question, which I always give people a little heads up on. What is the song title that you guys think best describes the current state of healthcare? I can't wait to hear what you guys picked.
I'm terrible at this kind of stuff, so I've been racking my brain. But it's going to totally sound cheesy, but I just thought of Imagine. I just thought, imagine what we can do. It's really there's some exciting things happening, and I think that if we can be imaginative, that would be really fantastic.
I like that. Ours have kind of been downers so far, so that's good in terms of their titles. So that's a good one. Miya, what do you have?
Well, I have I love Sam Cooke, and he's got this song called "A Change Is Gonna Come," and we really feel like at an amazing point right now, and there's so much that could be done, but we need to be the change makers, and we need to lead that work, and it's done well. So
amazing, both uplifting ones. And for our listeners, we have made a Spotify playlist of all of our contributions to our Savvy Healthcare soundtrack. I think I put that up on the website now too, just for fun. We're keeping those curated, so it's great to have some uplifting additions between Sonic Youth and Alanis Morissette and some other great ones, Bon Jovi. So we've got all sorts on there. All right, before we close out, is there anything that you guys are working on that you want to plug? I know that you guys have a podcast. Yeah, no, I would love to hear about that, or anything else that we can share with our audience.
Yeah, we have a great podcast called Yeah, No, and it can be found on iTunes. It can be found at yeahnopodcast.com. We talk about healthcare. We talk about starting a small business. We're in the 3rd season. We'd love to have people write us and tell us about, what they want to listen to. So it's really fantastic. We also have a startup within a startup called Cahoots. It's a partnership platform around managing care at home and trying to reduce 30-day readmissions. So we're always looking for people to partner with and help us to kind of bring Cahoots to the forefront and get it out there and start to pilot within hospitals or doctors' offices. So I would say that that's one of the plugs I wanted to provide at the end of it.
Amazing. Well, you guys have heard it here first. If you guys are interested, you can always, reach out to them. If you ever have questions about any of our speakers and how to get in touch, you can always reach us at hello@savvy.coop, and we would be happy to facilitate all these introductions because we just want more collaboration in healthcare. So with that, before we close out, I want to just remind everybody that next week we will be back, again, digesting one of Savvy's values. This time it's going to be challenging assumptions with the infamous Dave DeBronkart, who you may know as ePatient Dave, will be here challenging us on how to really think about breaking down some of those assumptions that we see in the healthcare system. So that's one you don't want to miss. And before we say goodnight, I will let our fantastic guests give one more goodbye, and we all want to thank them for their time tonight and really helping us understand what it means to innovate with purpose. So Tina and Miya, I'll throw it to you for a final goodbye.
Thanks, Jen. We really enjoyed it. We love everything that you stand for, and we've had a great collaboration and partnership. We're very excited for that always, and always excited to see what's going to happen in the future. Diagrams, our main purpose is to really design through the eyes of the patient. That's always been the way that it has been. And we're always looking for lovely people like yourself to collaborate with, so please feel free to reach out anytime.
Fantastic. And Miya, sign up from California over there. Go get some sunshine.
Yes. Thank you so much. We're so excited. And again, healthcare is such a small world, and we just need more people to, add to the conversation, the discussion like these. So it's fabulous to be a part of this.
Well,
excited to see where it goes.
And thank you to our viewers tonight for taking time on your Sundays, and to all our viewers watching later. And we look forward to continuing these Savvy Chats next week. So until then, good night, everybody. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye.